most recent update to the game, we've seen another commander awakened, and that is Tyrion. We did also see the Night King awakened, but he came into the game on release awakened, so it's a bit different. And Tyrion, he's one which people were wondering about him for quite a long time and how they'd handle his awakening, because it was for quite a long time theorized that you could just convert all his tokens that you had excess of into epic medals and he'd be upgradable via epics. But in the end, he's another one of these which you can only awaken through his own tokens, which for him specifically is a 2-to-1 conversion ratio from his own medals, which means you need 1,200 Tyrion medals after golding him for like 330 Tyrion medals to 4-star him, which at this point in the game I believe at least is entirely impossible, and no one has him at 4-star because that is ridiculous. That's effectively golding him an extra 3.6 times, I think it is, after getting him to gold, which is already incredibly difficult as it is. And obviously the main way of getting medals for him is elite events, and the amount of research events specifically that you can do is just finite, because research is finite, so you can't do every single Tyrion research which gets put out there just because you don't have the researchers to do it. So other than that, it's like ET, where you get 5 every 2 weeks, and then the Tyrion training events. But 1,200 Tyrion medals is a lot. So anyone getting him 4-star will either be via them introducing new ways of getting his medals into the game, or a long way into the future, I would imagine. And that puts him in a unique position because you'd expect, or hope at least, that his 4-star and his stats should be very good to make that grind worthwhile, otherwise it's just not worth the effort. So I had something like 350 or so excess medals, so I could get him to 2-star immediately, and he does have combat rate in the tavern, which makes that a pretty good spot to leave him at, really. He also has, I think, aptitude and finance. Aptitude's alright, finance is basically pointless, for seasoned players at least. In terms of his stats, he has defense is a bit weird, because if you look at the single stages here, the way we project these stats, because obviously no one has him 4-star, so no one knows what this is yet, you just multiply this number normally by how many stages there are to it. Here though, if that was 7 times 1.2, that would be 7.2, like attack and health is. So it isn't leveling linearly, so I'm not entirely sure what defense is. It should be, if it only goes up in more 1.2s like we see here, it should be 39.4% total defense, and then it will be 38.4% total attack, and 15.6% total health, and 70% research speed at full hidden abilities at 3 stars with all books put into them. So the stats aren't that great really. It's around Seg's level, a little bit worse in terms of the total attack and total defense, but a bit higher on the total health. So it's nothing crazy when you consider how difficult it is to get him up to the higher awakening levels. So the thing which obviously would have to be exceptional for him to make him really worth it is this 4-star ability, because he's not really used in like training grounds or Werewood Memories. He's sort of okay for rebel leaders, but he used to be used as a tank, and you'd put him as the tank so he got extra might recovery on his active here, so he could buff everyone else up, and he'd be a DPS increase through that. But now with Lario being in the game, that role's sort of been taken from him, so even that, for rebellies and stuff, he won't be very good there either, I would imagine at least. So it's all down to this 4-star. 20 seconds after the battle begins, when allied troops deal counter damage, there is a 50% chance of rerouting enemy troops, number being 20% of enemy troops lost this time away from the battlefield. Now, until we see this actually in practice in the game, we will not know how this actually works specifically, but I think there's 4 potential interpretations of this, which it could be. So one is either a single time 50% proc rate, 20% reroute effect of all the defeated troops after 20 seconds. I sort of can't see that being the case because there's a 50% chance that he doesn't have a 4-star ability basically, which is terrible, and I don't think he'd ever be used because of that. You just want a lot more guaranteed value. It could also be a 50% chance proc rate until it's used, and then it stops after a single use. So if you do counter damage at 21 seconds and the 50% chance doesn't go your way, and at 22 seconds you do counter damage again, and at that time the 50% chance does go your way, and it will reroute 20% of defeated troops after that. That I could see being the case. If that is the case though, it's not really that good, really, when you do the maths on it. The problem is, the other 2 interpretations of it, if it is them, this will be the best 4-star ability in the game, and it probably won't even be close. Maybe the F5 Commanders or the Night King or something, but this is really ridiculous. And I did the maths on this with my last saved rally report, which was here. So I went into the battle record and mapped all these numbers out. So I'd say the other 2 interpretations of it is either every single time Tyrion's lineup in your attacking march does counter damage, it'll have a 50% chance of rerouting 20% of defeated troops all the way until the end of the fight, or it is every single lineup that does counter damage will proc a 50% chance of rerouting. Whichever one it is, the numbers this goes to is mental, and obviously with this saved report, it is sort of best case scenario. There's about 5 million defeated in there, a little bit shy of it. It's like 4.94 mil or so. So if you were doing solo attacks or something like that, it wouldn't have this high value. But I mapped it out, so B3 in this report is in front, which means cav damage will be the counter. So B3 is what I would just imagine Tyrion's lineup being. I just stuck to one lineup, and it's every time cav does damage, as you see here. So I mapped it out on how many times it did counter damage, and that's 15 times in the remaining 19 seconds realistically, because I don't think it will be able to proc at 20. It might, but with something like Latz's 4-star, for example, it says after 18 seconds, but it doesn't proc at 18, or it's every 3 seconds up to 6 stacks, so basically 18% there. But it only starts after the 18, it doesn't proc at the 18 seconds. So I'm assuming that same concept would apply here. So all these numbers in this sort of second column next to the seconds is the amount of defeated at that time. I just added it up all the way down, and then times 0.2 is the 20% reroute effect, obviously. So this number here, and all the same going down, would be how many it reroutes each time. So if it's just a single proc, if it procs one time, in this report at least, it would reroute about 450k troops, which is pretty solid honestly, but you do have to remember this is really best case scenario. So you will not be getting like 5 mil defeated on every time you attack. So in terms of a best case, it's alright. You've also got to remember it's a 50% proc rate. So it depends on which interpretation you do. If it keeps procking until you get the reroute effect, this is guaranteed. If it isn't guaranteed, then you sort of have to half the value, I'd say, just to get an average. value in your mind, so it would be about 222k as a reroute effect on average off that report. If this is a solo attack, even a good solo attack, the defeated would probably be like 4 or 5 times lower, so it would only be rerouting, say, 50k, which really isn't that crazy whatsoever. Then if you add up all these all the way down, all the way to the bottom here, and then tally them up, this would be if every time that lineup does counter damage, and every time the 50% chance went your way, you could theoretically reroute 10.4 million troops. Obviously, if you're thinking about that on an average, it would average out to be around 5.2 million instead, if you take that into account. But if this is possible, and this is the worst case scenario in the second 2 interpretations, remember, because this is just one lineup. If this is every lineup, you would consistently be winning lords off rallies against like max accounts. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about this 4-star. It's either very meh, in my opinion, but especially considering how difficult it is to get, or it is the most broken thing ever put in the game. Because if you hit pure counter on a max account with another max account, you will kill everything just because you'll reroute everything. So you'll cap his lord even when he's defending, even if he has his lord at home or something, which is beyond game breaking. And also these defeated numbers would be artificially higher too, because obviously you'll be rerouting as the fight goes on, so you'll be killing more as the fight goes on, because they'll be damaging you less, so your DPS numbers will stay higher because you won't have as many troops dying and stuff like that. I would assume the most likely, or most balanced way it would be added into the game at least would be it would keep doing the 50% roll until it procs every time counter damage is done off Tyrion's lineup, probably. So it would just be this sort of middling reroute effect, which is sort of okay. Like, it's total attack and a decent reroute effect, which is solid enough. But I really don't think it would be worth the grind, but you can sort of just grind it long term anyway, just doing like Tyrion training events, because those are very efficient training events. They give a lot of training speeds and march speed ups as well. And motivation also. Motivation's very hard to come by nowadays, and those training events are a very good way of getting it. So you can just slowly grind it through that. But I don't see how anyone is ever gonna unlock him, honestly, unless they add him into the Black Diamond store or something crazy, because it's just such a grind. I'm not entirely sure about the design decisions about stuff like Tyrion and tier 5s, where it's just like years and years of grinding to be able to unlock them basically at the current rates. It just seems a bit demotivating, in my opinion. But it's what we're getting, so we gotta deal with it. I realise this video won't help anyone, because no one will have him, and you can't really go out your way to grind him. But I think it's interesting to theorise, at least. I can imagine the first person unlocking him, and it hasn't been playtested at all, because no one has him, and suddenly that this is how it actually works, and you just have someone out there rallying max accounts and capping their lords every time, which would just be hilarious, however stupid it would actually be. So yeah, we'll have to see how it all plays out when he finally gets unlocked to that point. Until then, it's all just numbers and theories, really.